Welcome to the We're Good podcast, where we are celebrating the everyday brilliance of people working toward a more positive world. If you're looking for the good that's taking place around you, you've come to the right place. This episode of the We're Good podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Community Foundation for Northern Virginia, an organization building a region that works for everyone. With deep local roots and mission-driven collaboration, they are making more possible across Northern Virginia. Families. They come in all shapes, sizes, and circumstances. Today on the We're Good podcast, you'll meet some foster and adoptive parents who are opening their hearts and homes. And you'll hear about a powerful common thread that runs through their community. It's a real need, one that many families face, whether you're part of the foster system or not. Today, you'll find out how Formed Families Forward is providing families with vital ways to find community, and how they have a brand new resource hub that just launched. This conversation might change the way you think about family and how we all move forward together. Today on the We're Good podcast. Welcome back to the We're Good podcast. I'm Lee Ann Necessary Brownlee, your host, and I'm so excited today to be bringing you here on location to our new organization that we're highlighting today, Formed Families Forward here in Fairfax, Virginia. Joining me is the executive director and actually the founder of this organization, Kelly Henderson. Thank you so much for being here, Kelly.
Nice to be here.
Stacia Stribling, who's the deputy director, and we appreciate that, and Dr. Monique Lalacos, who has a very long title. She has a PhD in clinical social work. You have been a clinical social worker and also CEO of your own company now. So we really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you. And all these titles are amazing, but the title that I think you all might be proudest of and that is so near and dear to this organization is that you are foster parents, foster to adopt parents, and kinship parents. And we're going to learn a lot about that. I will have to say I've learned a lot in talking with all of you about how families come in all shapes and sizes. And we're just thrilled to be here to find out, why was it formed?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity. So, now 15 years ago, I was a mom of three young kiddos, two of whom joined our family through foster care adoption, and we were struggling. I am a special educator by profession, have advanced degrees, have worked in the field for decades. We're in very well-resourced Northern Virginia, and I was struggling to find the services and supports that my children needed. I was not alone. So there were a sort of informal group of other moms that were formed through foster care and adoption and kinship care. And I'll take a moment to just say that kinship care is when an extended family member or close family friend has stepped in to raise a child or youth. And that's very common. That is a very common family structure. Anyhow, there were a group of us that got together. We began just sharing our stories and frustrations, and we realized that, again, all of us professionals in our own right in different fields, professional fields in the area, and we were still really struggling to secure the services that our children need. Our children in foster, adoptive, and kinship families often have very intense needs. Often those manifest as significant behavior challenges as well as learning challenges. And so we decided we wanted to just sort of band together and start supporting other families. We've been very fortunate over the years to grow that mission. And we've moved from a completely volunteer organization to an organization where we have staff that are able to help deliver critical services. Those services include training, peer support groups, individual consultations. So we'll sit one-on-one with the family, wherever is most comfortable for them, Zoom or in person, and really get to the nature of the biggest challenges that they're facing at that moment. We do, in addition, we have a great resource directory. We have a variety of resources, and we do classes. We do parenting classes online and in person, and we have youth classes. So we try to cover the spectrum of what is most needed, and we do it from that family to family lens. And I think
that's what I was going to say. That family to family lens is going to be so important. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we also want people to stay tuned more about the resources because we have a big announcement that's going to be coming up, which is exciting. But Kelly, can you give us the scope for our audience that's listening? You said that you were just a group of volunteers. Now, how many people are you serving?
Yes. So we reach 4,000 individuals a year, and mostly those are parents and caregivers. Some youth participate, as I mentioned, directly in our programming, and then professional partners. And those are folks that are working to support families and children. So educators, social workers, counselors, other mental health providers. The issue of trauma looms large in our families. And so we work a lot with families that are impacted by trauma, children that are impacted by trauma, and then professionals who work in that trauma space as well. So we reach about 4,000 individuals annually, and then directly serve with our specific individualized services about 2,000 individuals.
And we're doing a lot of numbers, but some numbers that were really impressive to me were the fact that you said that a lot of the families that you're serving have children who have special needs, or they have had trauma and they need like special accommodations at school. Things like this that might be harder for foster families, kinship families to work through. But the statistics are amazing, the percentage of those children.
Yeah, so thanks for asking that. In families that we call formed families, our foster, adoptive, and kinship families, there is about 3 to 4 times the rate of disabilities and other specialized needs, often very intensive needs. So, in one study, for example, of foster families, children in foster care, nearly 30% of those children had identified specialized needs that required special education support and other services. And those are those that are identified. And we know there's many children out there that haven't necessarily had their needs formally identified. And so they struggle to get those services and supports. And so we know that disproportionality is very high. We also know that there's a lot of misdiagnosis and undiagnosed situations. And that's really where we come in to support families who are struggling to have those appropriate and intensive services that they need.
And we talked about that there's a common theme, a common thread that goes through this, and a lot of it is about struggle, but also about isolation. So everyone at some point faces some isolation, but this is different. And so, Stacia, if you can start with us, and then we'll go to Dr. Monique to talk about your family and why you came to this organization.
Sure. So I started my career as an elementary school teacher and went on to higher ed later on. And during that time, my husband and I decided to form our family through foster care adoption. And I was a little too confident in my abilities to handle that, probably because I felt I know how to work with kids. I understand child development. I understand education. I understand special education to a certain degree. And so then we were blessed with these two amazing kiddos. And I realized all of that education, all of that knowledge was not as helpful as I had hoped it would be. We really struggled in school, particularly around behaviors. That trauma piece, I think, came into play. And so as time went on, these kids needed a lot more support, a lot more hands-on, a lot more of my time than I was able to give as a full-time worker. So moved off of a tenure track and all of these things. So finally, we got to a point where I was leaving the university and was thinking of starting my own consulting business because here I was advocating for my kids nonstop. That pretty much was my full-time job. And I came across Form Families Forward and actually considered sitting on the board so I could just learn more about it, but they had a job opening. And so that worked out really
Yes,
well.
yay. That's great.
So I came on first as the administrative specialist and then have moved into the deputy director position. But it was like coming home because all of a sudden I had colleagues who were living a very similar life, who understood these things. So it became sort of my own personal support group, while at the same time I was able to help others and sort of move the field forward and help families out there.
That's wonderful. I love what you said, coming home.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Of course, family is in the name.
Yeah.
So there you go. Dr. Monique, it's interesting. I'm hearing all of you that you also had and have such an amazing educational background and have worked in this field for so long. And you too said that you would be remiss when you and I were talking that you didn't say I needed this organization. But tell us your journey to how you found Formed Family Forward. I think it's fascinating.
Okay. All right. First of all, I have to say, I never heard Stacia's story. So it's so nice hearing her story and
That's
kind
wonderful.
of hearing her background. Um, so yeah, I know I did say that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, the need for connection with families, particularly foster adoptive kinship families. I am a grandparent caregiver of now a 19-year-old who I raised since he was like around 9 months old. And he has special needs. He is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder as well as ADHD and some other diagnoses. He's got some trauma, other things going on. And I think from the time that I took him in, we've had different challenges. He was nonverbal for the first, let's say, I would say 4 years of his life. And I did think that he was going to be nonverbal throughout life. However, I got resources in, I got early intervention in very early on. We got counseling in place, we got behavior therapy in place. There was a time I was thinking about what Stacia said, and I was like, I was that parent who was getting all those resources in place. I'm also a single grandparent caregiver. So I did have to work. So I was juggling work and trying to manage him and bring in a lot of resources, and it was a lonely time. And it didn't help that there were times that I did have some employers that weren't very sensitive to my raising a special needs grandson, and I had to end up getting FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, in place. So there were a lot of things that I had to kind of put in place on my own. I think I shared with you that fortunately I am a social worker and I knew how to rally in the resources. However, it was challenging doing that. So, and despite that, I still worked on my education and I got my doctorate, and I kind of made like that doctorate like I needed it to be something that could help other people, but also be inspiring for me. So I did it on the implication of grandparent caregivers raising grandchildren on the autism spectrum. And
That's how you came to the
that's how I
organization,
came to
right?
the organization. I was looking for a place to connect with, and I found Kelly through so many different people. I was like calling around, I was emailing, and Kelly's name kept coming up. And the minute I got in touch with Kelly, I was like, I can see why everybody knows her.
Yeah. Feeling the love.
And I will just say, I will just add that Monique is acting as if it's been a one-directional relationship, but Monique has also offered her expertise, her professional expertise, and regularly presents on self-care and other key topics using her lived experience as well as her professional expertise. So it is definitely a bi-directional relationship that we have with our board members like Monique.
That's the best,
That
right?
is the best.
When it's
Yes.
organic and it happens. And so you do the dissertation and then you become a board member. And
Yeah.
a lot of people out there don't know what a kinship family is. Kelly gave us the definition, but you're living it.
Mhm.
And you say a lot of, maybe there's at least one friend you said that contacted you were like, yes, you're a kinship family.
Yes.
Can you tell us about?
I can. I can. So essentially, Kelly kind of covered it. A kinship family is a family member like myself who's raising somebody else's child, basically, in the family. So for me, it was my grandson. I have shared with friends of mine and the like that they're also kinship because maybe they're helping to raise a nephew or a niece, or there's a number of different ways that kinship families work. It can also be, honestly, somebody in the community that ends up raising somebody else's child for them. I think that I'm glad you asked because I think that kinship families are not talked about enough. And I think that was another reason why I wanted my dissertation specifically on grandparent caregivers that were raising their grandchildren, because that dissertation also covers what is kinship and some of the differences between fostering a child, adopting a child, and being a kinship caregiver. Resource wise, we talked a lot about resources here. There are different resources that are available to foster families and adoptive families that are not available to kinship families because you're raising a family member,
Or
essentially.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
So there's like not a lot of financial resources and other things that may be involved in that. And so that made it significantly challenging for me as well, raising my grandson, like um, having to reparent again for the second time, finding financial and other resources for childcare and so on and so forth. And I did do it. It was challenging to do it. And I do feel blessed to have a lot of organizations that did help me throughout the time that I was raising Dennis. I think with Kelly's organization, um, Dennis, my grandson, he has access to community support groups. I think I shared with you, they have a spring they Kelly does a number of events throughout the year. And
We do.
and so the biggest one being the Spring Forward event. And that event is so key because it helps caregivers get different types of training. Kelly gets a number of people as well as a keynote speaker to come in to help train the family members while the kids are having a great time. And
And it was something when you pointed that out, Kelly, I didn't even think about that the families have to have their continuing education a certain number of hours. And could that be something that if you don't know how to get that or how to, like, you come to the event, like, yeah, I can imagine that daycare and things like that, childcare is very difficult. So if you don't get those hours, could that be something that could really hurt you in the process?
So particularly with our foster families, our licensed foster families, there are requirements that agencies have for a number of continuing training hours, and our training does often count towards those hours, and we're pleased to offer that. We do that through events like Spring Forward, but we also have other trainings. We have, again, online trainings that many of our agency partners will accept as training hours, so we can make it flexible for those who might not be able to access childcare at a particular time. So we really do try to make our program offerings as open and accessible. In addition to the foster families who sort of have that requirement, we find that our adoptive families and our kinship families are very appreciative of the topics. And we ask every time we do a training, every time we have an event, what are your needs?
What are the names? What are the popular? I can only imagine if our audience is listening, they're like, okay, what are the top three topics?
Yeah. Well, one of them is definitely the topic we're going to talk about, specific to our work with the Community Foundation of Northern Virginia's grant. But I would say,
Congratulations, by the way.
Yes.
You are one of our Community Foundation Northern Virginia partner grant a guest. So congratulations on that.
and that topic is the topic of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and prenatal exposure that happens not infrequently in our families. I would say other topics and pretty much our first reason for being is to support the educational needs. We work with children who should have or do have individualized education programs or IEPs and 504 plans, who should be receiving specialized instruction and supports in the school. And we find that sometimes families don't understand all of their rights and responsibilities. We find that sometimes schools are not necessarily as prepared to deliver the trauma-informed programming that a child needs. And then related to that, I think our second most common need is related to behavior. Many of our children struggle with significant behaviors, and those behaviors may be related to the trauma exposure that they had, as well as developmental delays and other physical assaults that they may have had. So we find that our schools and our families and our mental health service systems still have a ways to go with providing the kinds of trauma-informed supports that families and children and youth need.
Okay. And of course, we said at the beginning that we had a big announcement that we were excited to say that because of the Community Foundation for Northern Virginia grant, you were able to create a new resource station. We're going to let you take this one because it's launched.
It is launched.
How exciting.
FASDvirginia.org is
Say that one more time.
FASD Virginia spelled out .org. And this is a new resource that we were able to create with the funding from the Community Foundation. As Kelly said, a lot of our families, there's a higher rate of prenatal exposure in the foster adoptive kinship community. And I'm actually raising 2 children with an FASD diagnosis. So fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is sort of a constellation of disabilities. It's sort of an umbrella term um, under which there are specific diagnoses related to a child being exposed in utero to alcohol. Um, they often, we do know that there's polysubstance abuse. So it's not always just alcohol. Sometimes there are other legal and illegal drugs as well that they have been exposed to. But alcohol actually has the most lasting negative impact on a fetus, particularly their brain development and in terms of things like executive function, things, cognition, and so you'll see a lot of struggles, and it is a spectrum. So each child looks different. So when I was raising, as I am raising my children, it will be a never-ending job. But they,
Parenting is, yes.
my son got that diagnosis probably when he was 6, along with a bunch of other diagnoses. So it was one thing that was kind of buried in the paperwork. And, we looked at ADHD, we looked at trauma because we know those things. FASD, I was not as familiar with. And so a lot of my time was spent eventually digging down into that and researching what was going on. But I found that I had to spend all of this time Googling things, reading things, and everything was just sort of spread out. And it's like, but what can I do for him here in Virginia? Where are the resources? Who do I go to that will help me with all of the needs that he has? And so that is sort of what led us to create this hub. We decided we are actually Forum Families Forward as an affiliate of FASD United, which is the national, sort of international, they have some international connections as well, organization on fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And so they have every September, we do an impact week in DC where we go and learn about research and we meet with other affiliates from across the US. And there were some other folks from Virginia there and we sat down and had lunch and we're like,
Other parts of Virginia.
other
Yeah,
parts of
that's
Virginia,
what you're
from
telling me.
Charlottesville. And we sat down and said, we're hearing from all these other states that they have so many more supports. They have clinics that are able to diagnose and provide wraparound services. Virginia does not have this. We need to start doing more in the state and make this better known. And so we started meeting monthly, every other couple months, talking about what it is we needed to do. And our first step was really help these families so that they don't spend all of this time researching and finding random things. Let's pull it all together for them and create this hub where they can find providers that are FASD informed. They can connect with specific trainings, but it's not just for caregivers, it's also for educators and healthcare providers. And so people, teachers, we know that 1 in 20 school-aged children would meet the criteria for having an FASD, but only 1% are diagnosed. So,
And so this hub, the way you all were explaining it, it will be statewide.
yes,
That's fabulous because you were saying that you were hearing from people in the far reaches, maybe Southwest Virginia. What were some other areas on
Tidewater.
that everybody felt like it would be great to have this resource because I guess the resources are so spread out, right?
yes, yeah,
And again, I think from a Northern Virginia lens where we think, oh, we've got so much access to, we are still a desert of FASD support. So it was so critical to have that Northern Virginia connection as well as be able to leverage this resource into a statewide platform. And so I think the contribution is priceless because it hasn't been done. And folks are struggling so mightily with this spectrum of disorders. And I think that's that contribution, again, from the Northern Virginia lens as well as statewide.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Statewide, congratulations on that. The grant and the hub. And of course, Dr. Monique, when you hear this has got to be fabulous too from an educator's perspective, right? From someone who runs a mentoring program that like you do, to the more resources, the better.
Absolutely. Even in just listening to what this grant is going to provide, across the spectrum of Virginia. I think that that is amazing. Kelly, you made a good point. Northern Virginia has an amazing amount of resources. I come from New York. I came from a place that had an amazing amount of resources, and you can never really have enough resources for these things. When you think about, this particular grant, and Stacia, you saying that 1 in 20, that number really stuck out for me, and the amount of people that are not getting diagnosed. So this is going to provide, and it's going to have the ability to provide services for children, families. We keep talking about connections, and I think that resources, connections. I know I personally spoke of loneliness because it can be very lonely raising a child with special needs, and no matter whether you're married, you're not married, you're single like me, it's challenging to do that. And I know that what got me through were the resources that I had available to me. And I know that Kelly and Stacia feel the same. So this is wonderful.
We're finding that there is a common thread with all of our guests was that everyone is looking for that community, and that you are creating something because there's a need. Clearly, there's a need. So I have to ask you, this is our question that we like to ask all of our guests, is if they could, someone peel back the curtain of Formed Families Forward and tell us something, and I want all three of you to be thinking, something that you would want to share with people who are listening right now, who wouldn't find on the website. You wouldn't find this on the website. Kelly, what? And,
Sure.
and I know Kelly's like ready to go. She's right. She's like, yes.
I think you find on our website tons and tons of resources. We have so many resources. The art of that, and I think the story that isn't often as visible, is the fact that you may be able to use some of those resources, and that's critically important, to be able to access those resources in the moment. But the journey is nowhere near completed. We work with families at one point on a specific issue, and then they recontact us. We revisit an issue 6 months later or 2 years later. That's, again, related, but very different and requires a different set of resources and supports. And so I think if you peel back the curtain, it's that we can provide resources for the immediate need, and we are there to walk alongside families for the entire journey. And it's going to be a long, long journey. You heard from Monique and myself, I have young adult children, that journey does not end at 18, that we are in this for the long haul, and those needs evolve and they change, and our responsiveness and our willingness to walk alongside families, I think, continues on. And that's, I think, a gift. And yeah,
Absolutely.
so I think that's the takeaway, is that you're never quite done. But having folks to walk with you and the resources you need to walk along that path is really critical.
That journey together is just so impactful. Stacia, what would your one thing be if you could think of one?
I can think of a lot.
I know.
But as a former educator, I think that the thing that I would highlight that maybe doesn't come across as much on our website is the fact that community is not just caregivers connecting with each other, but it's also caregivers and educators. And I think that it doesn't,
Providers. You said
and
providers.
providers. Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking about that. The
Yeah.
doctors and nurses and practitioners who are looking for resources.
Right. And I think that one of the things we do behind the scenes that might not be as obvious is working with all of those different players and helping them connect with each other and really hear each other, and use each other as supports, which, especially between teachers and caregivers, we need that to be, a powerful collaboration in order for the kids to grow into their best selves, right?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's a lot of people listening right now, right? It's not just impacting fostering kinship. It's the people that are relating with those families as well. Dr. Monique, you're going to close us out.
The thing that I thought about most is being a board member. I think about how the board is made up of mostly people that are kinship caregivers, foster care, adoptive parents. And that's a very unique board than any other board that you would ever see. And I think that there are just so many things that the website is never going to capture, right? And I hope that we captured some of that today.
Oh, well, I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I think you all, the three of you, have really showed that this Formed Families Forward is about connection and removing that isolation and really sharing the knowledge with so many. That's what I love, is that anybody listening today probably has somebody they're thinking about right now. And so I just thank you all for what you're doing for this organization. Excited about the hub, want people to check that out. And of course, we said the website, but you have a great website. And so we'll put all of this information up. The hub is linked on your website, which will now be linked to our website, we'regood.net. So you've been listening to all of this. You know what? Share this episode with someone today. Just do it, because it's going to impact a lot of people. And we appreciate you being a part of our family and listening in, and our audience. Of course, you can go to we'regood.net, our website. Be sure to join us on our YouTube channel, and also anywhere where you get your podcasts, because as we like to say, we're good and you're good, and we can all make a difference.